Continuing production of The Open Mind has been made possible by grants from the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, the Bluestein Family Foundation, the Joan Gans CUNY and Peter G. Peterson Fund, Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Malkin Fund, the May and Samuel Rudin Family Foundation, the Joanne and Kenneth Wellner Foundation, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and from the corporate community, Mutual of America. I'm Richard Heffner, your host on The Open Mind, and our conversation today centers on a highly publicized and controversial Time magazine cover story from earlier this year, an extraordinarily long piece about the American medical marketplace titled "Bitter Pill: Why Medical Bills Are Killing Us." Its author, also highly publicized and controversial investigative journalist, lawyer, businessman Stephen Brill, is my guest today. And I would note that 30 years ago, almost to the day, when he first joined me here on The Open Mind as the editor and publisher of The American Lawyer, many lawyers thought of it then as muckraking, because in it Steve was revealing so much about what one might have called our American legal marketplace. Of course, it's hard to believe my guest is against the very idea of a marketplace, because he has succeeded so well in and at it himself, with The American Lawyer, with Court TV, and with his various other business enterprises. Yet in reading his Time magazine article, "Bitter Pill: Why Medical Bills Are Killing Us," I get the strong feeling that ultimately it is negative only about dollars, not cents, only about what medicine in America costs us because of all the greedy fingers in the pie, and not about how much good sense it makes, how good American medicine really is. And I would ask Steve Brill if in thinking this, I'm on the right track.
Yeah, I guess you're sort of on the right track. I think the problem with medicine, with healthcare, unlike the legal marketplace or the marketplace for shoes or clothing or housing or anything else, is that you really can't have a free market, because the buyer never has any leverage and never has any power over the seller. The most extreme example would be if God forbid one of us slipped and fell as we came out of the studio, we'd be taken to the emergency room. It's not like we woke up this morning and said, gee, I wonder what's on sale at the emergency room today. I think I'll go take a look, and if I don't like their prices, I'll go to the next emergency room or the one after that. We're going to get taken to the emergency room. Typically, we won't care what it costs if we have really good insurance, but these days, most people don't have really, really good insurance the way they used to. But the marketplace does not work, and what this article is all about is why and how the marketplace doesn't work. And it was born out of a basic curiosity I had that whereas the debate over Obamacare and everything else really seems to be over who should pay medical bills, it's never been yet about why are the bills so high.
But in a not a word but a sentence, why are the bills so high?
Because the people doing the buying have no market power, and the people doing the selling have been able to set the prices at wherever they want. And we've made a decision as a country, unlike every other country in the free world and in the not so free world, that it's perfectly okay for a drug company CEO to make $20 million this year as a salary and $25 million next year, while someone who needs the cancer drug that they make isn't going to get it unless he can fork over $13,000, as I say in the article, for one treatment of that drug, when it costs that drug company $300 to make that drug. We've made that decision that we'll let the marketplace decide that, when everybody knows, I mean, it just stands logic on its head. Everybody knows that if I need a cancer drug to keep living, I don't have very much market power when it comes to how much I'm going to pay for the drug.
Steve, does that mean that many people are not getting the drugs they need to extend their lives?
It means many people aren't getting the drugs or the treatment or the tests that they need, but it also means that when they do, they or the rest of us, through our insurance premiums or through the government programs that supply people with health care, such as Medicaid or Medicare, it's bankrupting everybody else. It's almost as if in this country, in the last half decade or decade, we've lived in two universes. There's the universe you and I live in, which is a place where the economy hasn't been so good, in case you haven't noticed. There's been high unemployment, people are squeezed on their incomes, and they're really, we're all sort of, worried about the economy. Then there's this alternate universe of the medical economy where everybody just keeps making more and more money. Employment is high and getting higher. You can make $150,000, $200,000 with very little experience if you want to sell, CAT scan equipment for GE. And that's an alternate universe. Those people haven't gotten the memo that there's something wrong with the economy. And the reason that this is really so troubling is that alternate universe of the medical economy is really what is exploiting and sapping the real economy.
And your solution, sir?
My solution is that we have to treat medical care really differently than we treat every other kind of product that is bought in a marketplace, because what we have demonstrated with our experiment and our experiment alone, by leaving it to the free market, is that the free market doesn't work. The prices are way too high. I'm not saying that the CEO of a drug company shouldn't make a lot of money, but is it really necessary to have a salary of $15 or $20 million? Is it really necessary for the CEO of your local hospital in Bridgeport, Connecticut, to have a salary of $1.8 million a year at a supposedly nonprofit institution? Is that the way we really need to reward those people?
Steve, you say, is it really necessary? That sounds like talk from the far left, and yet I don't identify you with the far left.
You don't have to be on the far left or any place. I mean, if you believe in free markets, as I do, then what you believe in...
But not for medicine.
No, you can believe in free markets for medicine, but if you're going to believe in that, then you have to demonstrate that it is a free market, that it's not a stacked deck. Nobody believes in a marketplace, at least I don't think anybody should believe in a marketplace, where the buyer has none of the power vis-a-vis the seller. And that's what we have here. And the way to fix that is to give the seller more leverage in that marketplace. Now, one way to do that is to have what everybody calls the single payer system, where the buyer, in this case, it would be allowing everybody to enroll in something like a Medicare program, would have lots of power because they'd be doing so much of the buying.
The buyer would be the government.
Yeah. Now you could take that view, or you could say, well, let's have nobody have insurance, but let's have the government be on the hook to provide all kinds of subsidies for people who can't afford health care, on the premise that we want to live in a society where everybody can get health care. The problem with that is that, again, the individual buyer, you going out to buy a CAT scan, you don't have very much leverage, and your leverage is diminished still more as hospitals consolidate all around the country. They keep buying each other up, and worse, as they buy all the doctors' practices in the communities where the hospital is, so that when you look across the landscape in a typical community, you might only be able to go to one hospital. So the government has to intervene. Regulators have to intervene. This is what regulation is for, when a marketplace is not working. And if we haven't done anything else in the last few decades, we have demonstrated that the medical marketplace doesn't work. How have we demonstrated it? we pay 2 or 3 times as much per capita for healthcare in this country than any other developed country, and that's adjusting for the relative wealth of the countries, and yet our results are no better. And in many respects, our results are worse. If you look at life expectancy, infant mortality, and all those kinds of things, our results are worse.
Now, there have been those who've picked you up on that end of things, and that's why I began the program by saying that my sense was that you really weren't poor-mouthing American medicine in terms of its results, that you were concerned essentially, primarily, with the matter of what it is doing to
I
our
feel more
pocketbooks.
comfortable, and I think it's less distracting to this discussion if you just concede and say our results are no better, because
Yeah,
if
but you didn't stop there, Steve.
well because the data is that the results in many respects are worse.
There you go again.
But you can ascribe that data to lifestyle habits in this country, obesity, things like that, as an excuse for the results being worse. But the way I can win my argument most easily is just to say that we're spending lots more and not getting a better result.
Well,
It's
that's
sort of like the public education system, which is something that I wrote about last time I think I talked to you, and where there again we spend much more per capita on our K-12 education system, and there we know the results are worse.
But Steve, I'm glad you brought education up, because I was going to too, and ask whether it too falls under your rubric of this is too important to leave it to the market.
No, actually, education is quite the opposite. Education is one place where the marketplace would work. The problem with public education, it's almost a flip of the problem with healthcare. The problem with public education is it's a monopoly foisted on us by the government, and that if you allow that antitrust issue to go away by allowing people to sponsor, charter schools, as we now have in so many communities around the country that work, and you monitor them to make sure they work. They don't all work, but the majority of them do. You break the monopoly. We're on Manhattan Island. For people who live on the east side of Central Park and the west side of Central Park, a lot of them have plenty of school choice because they have the money to send their kids to private school. For people who live on the north side of Central Park, until the Bloomberg administration, they didn't have any choice. They had to send their kids to the public school, and the public school in their communities in Harlem was pretty much always a failure. But they didn't have any choice. And charter schools gave them the choice. Now, coming back to healthcare, the problem is that the private marketplace doesn't allow any choice, because at the point in which the consumer is buying, the consumer has no leverage. So it's actually the same kind of problem, but it's a different kind of solution.
What's been the reaction? And that's a laugh into my pocket question. What's been the reaction on the part of your medical friends in hospitals, in their medical practices? You have a lot of doctor friends.
Well, doctors are pretty much cheering this on. They said they work in a system that they know is broken, and as I try to point out in the article, the irony, the other sort of misfire in the whole system, is that for all the money that I just described, for all the alternate universe of all the people getting rich in the healthcare economy versus all the rest of us, the ones who haven't gotten that rich are the people who actually do the care, the nurses and the doctors. They're the ones who are getting squeezed by all these bureaucratic rules. They're getting squeezed by hospitals who are buying up their practices. Now, there are lots of doctors who make a lot of money, but if you show me a doctor who's making even as much as $1 million or $1.5 million a year, which there are a few who do, and I'm not talking about the doctors who own clinics or other things where they make money on the side. I'm talking about making the money just for practicing. If you show me a doctor that's so good that he or she is making $1.5 million a year, I can show you hundreds and hundreds of thousands of partners at corporate law firms who are making that much and more. And for my money, before I would attack a doctor for making that much money, I'd say, for what they do, that's sort of okay. The bigger problem to me is that you have you can have a marketing director at a nothing hospital who's making that much money, let alone the CEO. You can have, salesmen who win a regional contest for one of the CAT scan companies who can make that much money. That's a real issue, and it's a misallocation of our resources.
Okay, you write this article for whoever you wrote it for. It's published by Time magazine.
Yeah.
Tremendous fuss made about it. I mean, I know of few cover stories that have had the impact, or I should say,
Let's
have
hope.
garnered the attention that yours has. But then let's go to impact. What do you think will happen as a result?
Well, I think this article may be part of, or the starting point for, or one of the points of encouragement for a real opening up of the process, to real transparency. And when I say the starting point, or one of the starting points, what's going on as this article is being talked about is that people are focusing on their healthcare costs in a way that they never did for a lot of reasons. One of them is that it's gotten so expensive that it's rare that anyone now has an insurance policy where they really don't care what the stuff costs, because the co-pays are so high, the deductibles are so high, the limits are so high. So, pretty much everybody's focused on it. And certainly, every employer in America is focused on it, because they're looking at, their share of the insurance premium skyrocketing. As taxpayers, we're focused on it because it's become such a huge part of the federal budget. And all of that is going to just be accelerated by the opening of the insurance exchanges that come, this fall with the coming of the healthcare reforms of the Obama administration. So everybody is really thinking about this, and you could argue that, this article, lit a match and, into a really combustible situation to start with. So I think the first part of dealing with any kind of market problem or institutional problem is, the kind of awareness that forces a transparency. I will predict to you that, a year from now, it'll be too embarrassing and just impossible for, the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to charge, $77 for a box of gauze pads. There's just no way that you can hold a microphone in front of whoever runs that hospital, and have him explain that with a straight face.
But we don't very often hold microphones.
Well, I think that there are all kinds of reporters now all over the country as a result of this, looking at their local hospital. There are legislators. I saw some news clip the other day where some legislator in some town has proposed that the CEO of a hospital can't make more than X times a doctor at the hospital, or that a hospital that pays a CEO more than this loses its tax exemption. I mean, there's all this stuff sort of bubbling up, and it would have bubbled up anyway. I mean, this is not something where I sort of created an awareness and a problem. I think I spurred it by using real stories, real money, instead of just writing, another policy polemic about the problem.
And reproducing real bills.
Yeah, I mean, that's what really did it, because everybody has seen bills like that. Everybody's gotten an explanation of benefits from their insurance company, and they've looked and said, oh my God, I was just in the hospital for a day and a half, and it was, $58,000, but thank God for my insurance company, because they got a discount down to $11,000. And my copay is only, $1,100. What a deal! Until they say, wait a minute, I have to pay $1,100 for this. It was a stomach ache, and and I was in the hospital for a day and a half. How did that happen? Everybody has seen that, and this, I think, really struck a nerve, because it explained to them that they're not stupid. The fact that they didn't understand the bills or the discount or the code or the gobbledygook in the bills. They're just like everybody else, and it's really hard to understand, and the reason it's hard to understand is that the people writing the bills don't want you to understand it.
Steve, I understand what you're saying, and as I read the piece and reread it, I think I knew what your motive was, and that your reasoning would be that you were going to change a structure that needed to be changed because of what it was doing.
Well, I didn't
to our
start out that,
national
no, I mean,
pocketbook.
you give me either, too much credit or
I would
something
never
else.
do that, Steve.
But I started out on this because I was just curious, which is the way any good journalist should think about what a good story is. What are you really curious about? And when I listened to all the debates, over Obamacare and all this stuff, and at the same time, a relative of mine had gotten a huge hospital bill, which was totally covered by insurance, so it wasn't a hassle for him, but it was a $158,000 bill, and he showed it to me, and I said, "How could it be that much? What's going on here?" So my curiosity was, why does healthcare cost so much? So I thought, well, maybe it costs so much because we're so meticulous and we're so good, and we're so much better than any other country that's the cost of really good healthcare. That turned out not to be true. Maybe I thought it's because the culprit that I saw when I wrote about the public education system in the United States, which is largely union contracts, which makes the workers, unaccountable and very expensive and load all these pension costs and everything on. That's not the case here. The case is that the prices are just way too high for all the services. And why is that? It's because it's not a real marketplace, and nobody until recently has cared much about the prices except the insurance companies, and insurance isn't a terribly competitive industry anyway, so they really didn't care, and they're not terribly competent, so they just, they paid what they had to pay, and they would just raise their premiums every year.
Of course,
So I was just curious about how does something become $158,000? Why does it cost $900,000 or $1 million if you get cancer? And the other thing I was curious about, or that made me angry, was all these debates about, end-of-life care. And the debate usually goes like this. Someone has a terminal illness, and to keep that person alive for an extra 6 months is going to cost $500,000. Should we spend the $500,000 to keep that person alive for 6 months? Now, that is an agonizing debate, right? We could sit here for 5 shows and talk about that. But when you start that debate, you've already given in on something, which is, why does it cost $500,000? It would be a different debate. It would be the same debate, but slightly different. The terms would be different if it was, $42,000 for 6 months. It's a different dimension of a debate, and no one ever was asking that question.
But Steve, what puzzles me here is that I would never accuse you of naivete, but you're saying that you think holding a mirror up to this marketplace with all of its gross salaries is going to lead us to bring about change. I
That
was
isn't what I
under
said.
the... Well, then put it in your own terms.
What I believe about journalism in general is that it can be a real important factor in that the first way to change an institution, a system, whether it's education, legal system, healthcare, or just whether the supermarket down the road is screwing its customers. The first way to start to change that is to shine light on it.
Okay.
And then you get people aware, and that's the beginning of a process. I'm not an advocate. I'm not going to go testify in Congress about here's what we should do with the healthcare system, but what journalists do when they're doing their job well is they shine light on things, they answer questions, and in this case, the story was just hiding in plain sight. Everybody in America has bills. When I first started, some of my doctor friends and other people said, well, how are you going to get real bills? Now, I've always operated on the assumption that, if 20 people know something, any good reporter can know it. Here, there must be 200 million people in this country who have a medical bill, so I figured I'd get a half a dozen.
I didn't put it correctly. You have put it correctly because you're talking about your motivation. I'm puzzled that at the end of a period of time, a quite considerable period of time, in which we have learned, thanks to journalism to a large extent, about a parallel land of greed, not in a life-giving profession, not in medicine, but in Wall Street, when we have learned about amazing incomes, amazing salaries, amazing bonuses. If what I read today is correct, they're going back up again even further than they were 5 years ago.
You're talking about a really, metaphysical issue, which is, have we reached the point in our country, and this applies to Wall Street and applies to healthcare, where the special interests have so taken over, the making of public policy that, the democracy, just ain't working. One of the things I point out, if you want to get still more depressed, is that compared to the financial services industry, the healthcare lobby spends 6 or 7 times as much as financial services, 4 times as much as the feared military-industrial complex when it comes to throwing money around Washington. The financial services industry is a bunch of homeless people compared to the healthcare industry. Plus, they have another big political chip that is the opposite of what happens with financial services, which is in every community in America, people think of their local hospital as a great institution, which it is because it does cure the sick. It's the largest employer. They cure sick people, and it doesn't have the demonology associated with it that that Wall Street does. I will quarrel with one thing you said, though.
In a half minute.
I don't think it's really greed here. I think people tend to fall into maximizing their profit and their incomes when there's no opposition to it. It just sort of happens. I don't think people at Sloan Kettering wake up every morning, the administrator is saying, I'm just going to go make as much money as I can today. They wake up in the morning saying, I'm helping to organize an institution that is saving people's lives. But gradually, it just becomes so easy, and people are telling you, well, the guy at the other hospital is making $2 million a year. What about you? What do you, chop liver? Why don't you make $2 million? And it just sort of builds up because there's no accountability.
Steve, we've come to the end of our time, and I'm shocked to find that you're so, I'll have the last word, naive. I'm glad that you are. Thanks for joining me today.
Happy to do it.
And thanks, too, to you in the audience. I hope you join us next time. And meanwhile, as another old friend used to say, good night and good luck. And do visit the Open Mind website at 13.org/openmind. Continuing production of The Open Mind has been made possible by grants from the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, the Bluestein Family Foundation, the Joan Gans CUNY and Peter G. Peterson Fund, Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Malkin Fund, the May and Samuel Rudin Family Foundation, the Joanne and Kenneth Wellner Foundation, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and from the corporate community, Mutual of America.